Welcome, Business Bourbon and Cigars audience. I'm your host, Scott Joseph, and today we're diving deep into the world of business turnaround and value generation. So I'm thrilled to welcome Stewart Ervin, founder of Bracket Management, Fractional CFO company. He's specializing in helping small to medium-sized businesses achieve optimal financial health and strategic direction. And I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of the direction of a lot of what we're going to talk about on this show today. So I'm excited to kind of introduce you, if you're not familiar with this concept, because it's been a game changer for one of my businesses. So Stewart, he's dedicated his entire career to helping companies unlock their potential through effective financial strategies, innovative business turnarounds, and impactful value creation. With his expertise, he's developed a unique framework that can help companies improve their performance, which he's going to be sharing with us today. And if you're a business owner or a leader and you're looking to understand the key drivers of value creation, or you're facing challenges in your company's growth, I think you're in for a very enlightening episode. So stay with us, whether you're watching, whether you're listening. If you're watching or listening and let's just say you're driving, don't sip on the bourbon. Don't be doing the cigar. But if you're enjoying this for the comfort of your home, feel free to open up one of your better bourbons and enjoy this, because it's going to be able to, we're going to have some nice actionable things that you're going to be able to take back and really help strategize what you're doing moving forward. Before we begin, if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to Me Plus Ultra at meplusultra.com. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Me Plus Ultra Network. That way, you stay up to date and you catch all the inspiring episodes like the one we're about to do today. So let's get started. Stewart, welcome to Business Bourbon and Cigars.
Hey, Scott, appreciate you having me.
Man, love it. As I kind of said in the intro there, we just moved to Fractional CFO, and it's been a game changer. Before we dive into that and discuss all those benefits and why we did it, let's get to know you a little bit better. I want to introduce you to Business Bourbon and Cigars audience and community, and tell us a little bit about your journey. But really what I'm looking for, like, what were the key milestones that led you to start, I guess, Bracket Management?
Yeah. So I've always known from a very early age I wanted to go into business. I just didn't necessarily know what. Did I want to go into small business, corporate entrepreneurship? I was blessed that my dad at a very young age started me at the very bottom of his company, and I had to work my way all the way to the top. What I didn't realize at the time was it was teaching me the formula of all the inputs and outputs of the business, right? So my late teens and 20s was spent kind of searching that out. I tried every one of those. I've tried small business, entrepreneurship, and corporate America. And it happened that as an entrepreneur, I was heavily involved in investment real estate. I had a couple other small businesses, and a college buddy of mine said, "Hey, we need to start a company that helps other businesses." At the time, it was kind of business as a service, and we formed Bracket to work on marketing, HR, really bookkeeping. But it was more or less of our motto at the time was, let us do the boring stuff so you as the entrepreneur can do what you enjoy doing. So we were focused on the service community, so on and so forth. Well, again, most of my income at the time was through real estate investing. In 2008, 9, and 10, that really took a turn for the worse. So it saw me going back into corporate America again, which I am 100% okay with. So at the time, we shelved Bracket. What happened in 2010 was I realized that I had an ability to really turn businesses around, and it really was focused on what I had learned in my late teens and early 20s. And I was in supply chain at the time, and at that point, the company I worked for would send me out to turn these suppliers around that weren't supporting the program. I did that for about 5 or 6 years. One of the companies that I actually turned around said, "Hey, I really like the way you're doing things. I want to sell my company, but my company is in no position to be sold. I want to hire you as my ops and finance guy to come in and help turn me around." So he thought his books were good. He knew that he had a diversification issue. His metrics were terrible. So I tapped into that playbook that I learned a long time ago, turned this company around. We sold it. Here came another one. and then another one. And then in 2019, I started thinking back, wow, this could be something here, right? And so I thought I need to rebrand Bracket. I need to focus more on the strategy side and turnaround. So then in 2019, I had the opportunity to turn the largest P&L that I had managed to date. I turned that around, but it was in that time frame that I truly learned how to create value in a business. The fractional CFO stuff is fairly new to the marketplace, but I had tapped into what that term meant. And so I rebranded Bracket as a fractional CFO company. My focus was to try to get in front of the businesses before they needed to be turned around. And that's been my mission, since the rebrand is I want to get out in front of you so I don't have to be involved on the back end when you get ready to get turned around. So I tapped into that playbook. Of the last 10 years, I've been that turnaround and growth guy, and it's worked out pretty well.
I love it. And so let's talk a little bit. If we got people in the audience that aren't as familiar with what we're talking about when fractional CFO, so kind of define that for us, right? And then how does that role differ from a traditional full-time CFO?
Yeah. So fractional CFO, it really serves a variety of purposes. One, it could be that as an entrepreneur, the business owner, or business leader, you recognize that I've hit a ceiling. I can't grow beyond where I'm at. Your business is still healthy, but I just need help. And so you can say, I want to tap into the expertise of a seasoned CFO, but I really don't need you full time. I just need you to come in once a week, twice a month, whatever that might look like. So you will hire a fractional CFO on a part-time basis. The other one could be that you've lost complete control of your business and you need some turnaround. You need some help for growth. And then you can't afford a full-time CFO. So you hire a guy to come in, and again, in the same mode of I could come in once a week, twice a month, so on and so forth. The last area that I see a lot of people use a fractional CFO is if they are either getting ready to sell their business, or they are actually in the process of being sold, or they want to acquire a new business, and they just need to get some help with their books, get their stuff straight, get some strategy stuff implemented. Then they will hire us on an interim basis, kind of a project basis. The entire focus on how it differs from a consultant is we come in and work alongside of the entrepreneur. So we don't only come in and identify the problems, but we come in and work hand in hand with the entire team to help for the long run, help you fix, run, drive your business. Where, a lot of times a consultant will come in and identify the problem and then turn it over to the leader to help drive it. We're also different from a business coach in that the coach traditionally will work with one individual in the business. I insert myself as a member of the management team. So I'm working with the entire team, all the employees, so on and so forth. So the beauty is you get a seasoned, experienced CFO on a part-time basis in a part-time pay range.
So I own a MarTech company, J&L Marketing. And for the first 20 years, we had it down. I mean, the financial part was great. And then the last 10 to 15, started the company in 91. The last 10 to 15 years, things started to get a little more complicated, and we started hiring. We went through literally 3 or 4 CFOs. And I think what it really came down to, and a large reason we did not retain them, or it just didn't make financial sense for us because, that's an expensive position. We were in between. Do we really want to pay what a great CFO is worth? We didn't know we didn't have that in the budget. We didn't really want to do that. So we tried to find that up and coming person. But the reality was the job, we overcomplicated the business, or we thought it was more complicated than it was. And what we did have, and what got us into it is, we have a good network. We have good relationships with people in the community, and our president and my partner, he's trying to recruit this CFO from this big organization. And he looks at it and he goes, Jamil, he goes, I'd be bored as shit there.
Yeah.
He goes, that's the real issue. He goes, all you really need is this guy or this type of person, this role. And he goes, I don't want to do that. He goes, you need to hire someone that does this and then do someone that can come in at times and do some of the heavier lifting, some of the bigger stuff, but that's not a full-time job. So literally we went to a fractional CFO, and we've got someone that manages our books, and she does a phenomenal job. And then, man, it's the happiest. This has now been 2 years. This is the happiest we've ever been. By the way, for a lot less. And so from a total expense standpoint, our books have never looked better. We don't have the headaches we were dealing with. Not even forget the fact, all the headache of trying to recruit, onboard, train, retain that come with full-time employees, right? Game changer for us. So when people hire you guys, and you brought up some of those scenarios, how often do you run into that situation?
In regards to just relief with the owner or the leader?
Well, just like they're looking for it, because almost a very similar spot to what we were in.
Yeah. So it's actually pretty much most cases is that way of, luckily I've been blessed that the guys I have on board today, they all, because they know half of them knew me. So it was referral based. The other guys reached out, but it is that is the big selling feature that I tell everyone. If you just knew how much your life is going to improve, how much your personal life is going to improve, you're going to be able to sleep better knowing. You got a guy who you can call at any time, and you're paying them a fraction of the cost, right? And so you hit it on the head. You get a lot of times, you get these big guys, me included. I would have been bored out of my mind if I go into a smaller company. Now, again, starting out, it would have been great because I didn't know any better. But once you get up into the bigger ranks and you're accustomed to that pressure and you're accustomed to that pace, to take a step down would be difficult. So it's a happy marriage in that you've got guys who are driven, and we can take so much off the owner's plate or the leader's plate and just catapult their business. And so that is the number one selling feature. I tell everybody, if you can just let me talk to the owner, I can sell it because I can tell you how much your life will improve once you're on the other side of it.
And I don't want this entire episode to be all about the fractional CFO, only in the sense that, but man, I really wanted to hammer that home right out of the beginning because it's helped us so much.
Yeah.
But I love what you bring to the table from the value creation, and you talked about that on your journey, and really kind of what got you, launched into this. And so you mentioned there are common reasons why businesses don't reach their full potential.
That's right.
Can you elaborate on those and give us some real world examples?
Yeah. So it goes a lot into what we've already talked about. A lot of times you'll see that the business owner or their leader, they're so inundated with the tactical execution that they fail to look at and take a step up and drive their business. So a lot of times, if you don't have a true financial professional in your business, you're only looking at your results, right? You're looking in the rear view and you're not driving forward. And so I tell most people that's really where the CFO steps in, right? You got a bookkeeper who manages the rear view, they manage the results. It's up to the CFO to take those results and help drive the business forward. And so the biggest thing I see of these small business owners is they don't know how to look to the future and drive their business, or they're so swallowed with the day-to-day that they don't take a step up and take a breath and say, hey, how can I drive this business? And so that's the point. And then a lot of times it's difficult because the reason why a CFO or fractional CFO can't guarantee results is because it really is still your business. All we can really do is drive on your behalf and kind of coach and drive and push. And so every business is different. The cultures are different. And we just have to really kind of come along and just really try to push the business at a certain pace. But it's, again, the owner has got to be open and willing to make that thing happen.
Yeah. So you go in and someone hires you to do a turnaround,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or it doesn't matter if it's a turnaround or I want to maximize the value, whatever it might be. What's the first, I guess, key areas that you start looking at?
Yeah. So part of what I do is what I ask for after we've done our discovery call, what I want to know is I want to look at your past 3 years of financials. I don't want to have a conversation with you. I want to be able to take your numbers and let me tell you what your numbers are telling you about your business. Okay. And so what that allows me to do is, like, when I go into do the really kind of the face-to-face sales call, I say, okay, this is your business by the numbers. And I basically dissect their past 3 years, and I say, hey, this is where you're healthy, this is where you're weak, so on and so forth. So the very first thing I look at is the financial position of the business. Are they healthy? Are they not? If you look at a 3-year average, you can see a trend. Are you growing? Are you decreasing? In what areas are you having cash constraints? Because I look at all three. I look at the cash flow statement, income statement, and balance sheet. So once I have a firm understanding of where they're at financially, I'll then get into the operations side of the business, because you can be strong and healthy financially, but if your operations are weak, your financials will suffer. It just may take some time. And then the third thing we look at is strategy, right? So right out of the box, I want to check where are you at financially. Obviously, I can then, in turn, if I see a weak area in the financials, I traditionally can pinpoint where there's a problem in your operations.
All right. So you identify, I guess, three main ways to create value in business, right? You got pricing strategies, which there's a lot of very successful businesses that probably lucked into that. There was no strategy involved other than, all right, this is what markets, I think we can get this. They price things that way. Cost management, obviously, and then new business growth. So can you walk us through these three approaches, and then, like, what's the typical advice you might be giving businesses in those areas?
Yeah. So what I try to do is I try to, in each one of those areas, do incremental improvements. So let's talk about pricing first. Traditionally, a sales guy or an owner, they have fought like crazy to try to get this customer on board, and they're terrified to take their pricing up. But they have to understand that for every dollar that they take up is a dollar that they put to their bottom line. And so if you can, right out of the box, somewhat set the precedent that we do price increases, but on the backside, I tell them, if you can do a 3% price increase, you got to also take 3% of your value that you're offering the customer up, because you still want to make sure that the customer does not want to leave you. So our goal is always to try to keep the cost basis the same, but in business, your cost of goods go up, things change. But a lot of times what you do not see is the owner or the leader or the sales guy say, okay, my costs have gone up, Mr. Customer, I've got to go up by X amount as well. So what we try to do is put something in place to recognize at least a 3% year over year price. And that really varies per industry. If you have an IP or you own something specific and something special, you may can drive that up higher. If you're just like a Me Too manufacturer, or you're in a industry that really is cost competitive, then you may can only drive that up by 1 or 2%. But at the end of the day, it's really focused on, if my costs go up, can I take my price up? The second one is obviously the cost piece of it. A lot of times what you'll see is businesses grow, they lose control of their cost. And so the cost may go up faster than their top line goes up. So our goal is to maintain or reduce cost, again, by 3%. And so that means that we're looking at efficiencies again. So I'm a manufacturing guy, right? So I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt. So I go in these places, I'm trying to consistently drive efficiency. And that's in all parts of the business. So again, if you can focus on saying, hey, I want to year over year take 3% of my cost out, that's great, because now you're taking 3% to the bottom line on price, 3% of your cost out. Then the last value driver we look at is profitable new business. Again, you've got to continue to grow your business to have something to add price to. You got to consistently grow your business to have something to take cost out of. The more you can grow, inherently your economies of scale is going to improve, and you should better drive your costs down, and you can focus on those three areas. On average, if you can take 3% price, 3% cost in cost improvements, and 3% new business, you can easily anticipate an 8 to 10% improvement to your bottom line year over year. Incremental improvements in those three areas drive value in your business.
It's awesome. How often when you do a turnaround, do you go in there and you're looking at operations and you can see over the last several years, all they really did was throw people at the problem? And so one of the best things we ever did, this goes back into the late 90s, early 2000s. When I started to come, I was 22 years old. So I knew nothing. I had to learn on the job training. And I went through 10 years, and year 4 through, let's say, 10 we grew pretty well. They had the sales cranking along, and what I didn't know was operations. I had the same process in year 10. I mean, basically the same process, to where literally I had one or two people doing so much work, I was killing them. And then then mistakes start happening, right? And you can't have that because quality's critical. And I knew my ex-wife, her uncle, he was a Six Sigma Kaizen, came from a manufacturing background, man, and he brought us in, and all of a sudden we're barrier boarding, root causing, I mean, Kaizen. I mean, he's out there he's with stopwatches, timing things, one piece flow, completely transformed everything we did. We applied it to literally every aspect of our business. Even when we got to a point where, let's say we had to introduce a new product or service, and there was a new data technique we were doing, but our salespeople, it was much more, I don't want to say confusing. They just didn't know it. They weren't as comfortable selling it. They didn't know the process. The pricing wasn't as comfortable to them. It was new, right? So all that comes with new. And he literally came in, walked them through, this is how it is. This is how we're going to process it to make this easy for you guys. We Kaizen that. And I mean, we started selling that stuff. And it had a big impact on our sales too, because it outperformed what we were doing prior. But we weren't selling it regardless of how well it was being performed, because it was confusing and the process was, I guess, cumbersome to sales and ops. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah,
man,
I see it all the time.
Cleaned all that up, and man, it just skyrocketed us. So I'm a big proponent in what you do. I love it. Talk to us about a business playbook with the six. I guess you got what, 6 key plays for achieving a healthy business. Talk to us about this. Break down what those plays are, and then why they're important.
Yeah, so there's 6 plays altogether. Really, the first 5 are meant to try to get the company in a position of health and stability. Play 6 is the 3 value drivers we just discussed. So the very first play that we try to implement when we go into a company is to develop some sort of a communication plan. We need the employees to understand why we're in business, why we do what we do, but most importantly, we need to understand, are we winning at that why? And so if they don't really know why they're doing what they're doing, we immediately put them through a mission, vision, and values, right? And that's you got to understand, obviously businesses exist for profits, but there's a deeper reason why. So we establish the why, then we go into the win. So we really break it down to, if you win your day, you win your week, you win your week, you win your month, quarter, and year. So when you get into the second play, which is the annual plan, you got to back that all the way up to and say, did I win today? So we put a communication plan in place where we identified, did we win the day? Then we go into tomorrow, did we win the day? If we didn't win yesterday, what can we do different today? And sometimes it can be very boring, but it's a 15-minute discussion every day. Did we win, right? So then we break that down into, we have a weekly meeting to work on the tactical side of the business at a senior management level, break into the quarterly strategic side of things and quarterly review. And the entire focus is, if we win the day, the week, the month, the quarter, the year, then we're obviously driving our business. Play number 2, super critical, is an annual plan. We have to have a North Star. And again, it can be a very detailed budget. If you're just starting out, it doesn't have to be, but this is where I say where a fractional CFO can help. Again, you set a 12-month plan and you freeze it, and all things you do are driving towards that. And that plan should be a little uncomfortable when you first make it, because it should stretch you as a business. I mean, again, you're trying to drive your business forward. So we develop a North Star, an annual plan in play 2. Play 3 is, once we identify that annual plan, we're going to try to build a sales funnel that's 2 to 3x of your goal, right? So if you're saying, hey, I need to be a $10 million a year business, I've got $2 million of backlog, I've got to go find $8 million of business. Well, you're going to be lucky to get the 8. So let's shoot for 16 or 24 million and hope that we get 8, right? You got to have that backup. Play 4 focuses on monthly business reviews that are always reviewing the plan and the sales funnel. So in there, we're going to start working on forecast. We want to know if we forecast it, what actually happened and what knobs do we need to turn in the future to make sure we hit that play number 2, which is the North Star, the plan. In there, we're going to have sales and operations planning. We want to make sure that whatever we're selling, the operations group can execute. The worst thing in the world is you could have a sales guy going absolutely rogue and trying to sell stuff that the operations team can never make happen. So we're going to focus on sales and ops planning, and then we're going to look at major project status and updates. Play number 5, it really centers around the employees. We want to make sure that the employees act as an owner. So if that's the case, then they need to understand what their job is. So a job description is critical. They need to understand if they're winning or not. So we develop KPIs for each employee. They need to understand that if I perform, I know what I'm supposed to do. If I perform in this manner, what can I expect from our pay? So we provide pay ranges for every single role. And lastly is they need to be rewarded as an owner. And so we try to put some sort of a bonus program in place to make sure that their efforts are tied to not only their performance, but the performance of the company. If you can get those 5 things going, you have a very stable, healthy business that allows you to go into the play 6, which is the value creation through cost, price, and profitable new business. So again, those are the 6 plays that have been proven time and time again. If you can make it happen with those 6 plays, you will have a great business.
That's awesome. I love how you break it down. So how'd you come up with this? I know there's a lot of on the job stuff, but where was the aha moment for you?
Okay, so I'm a Dave Ramsey guy, and he has the 7 baby steps. All right, and so as a fractional CFO, obviously it's something new. So I was thinking to myself, I need a baby step. I need something. And so I got thinking to myself, okay, after I get a business turned around, which is normally like a 3 or 4 month deal, what were the things that I said this business must do? And I just continue to hone it in and play with it. It was 7, 9, 10 points. And I kind of played with a bunch. And I said, okay, these really are the 6 key things that you need to do as a business. And I know that I have found success by doing these 5 to 6 things. And so I just basically pulled it together and said, okay, these are the must-haves for a business. So it's tried and true. I mean, it's not something I just made up. I have executed this in every company I've ever walked into. So,
but what I love about it is I tell this and advise this to a lot of different business owners. I love you keep your eyes wide open, right? And you have the ability. I think it's so important for a business owner to be able to look at other industries. In your case, Dave Ramsey. See what he's doing and being like, this simplifies it for me, or I like this part of a process, or I like the way I was treated, whatever it is, and be able to be like, I could easily integrate this into what I do. I'm not copying Dave. I'm copying an element that I like the way Dave structured something and presented it. That makes sense for what I do. And what are the elements that I do every day that I can fit into that structure, and it helps you articulate. If businesses, what's common in certain industries can be breakthroughs in others. And so I love, that's an example on a smaller scale of what we're talking about there. And I love it. Let's talk a little bit about leadership. Like, you're obviously exposed to a lot of different companies. Talk to me about what makes a good leader, bad leader, and then why is it so important in business?
Yeah. So John Maxwell has in the irrefutable laws of leadership, he has a law that stood out to me because I've seen it play out over and over again. It's the law of the lid, right? And so if you're not familiar with that law, it basically says, as the leader, your organization is only going to perform at the level that you are. So if you're a 5 out of 10, you're only going to have a 5 out of 10 situation, right? You may have 7, 8s, and 9s beneath you, but they're going to get so frustrated that they're going to leave your business, right? So you're only going to be a 5. So your goal as a leader is to identify, hey, I'm a 5, and I need to surround myself with guys that are at 7, 8, 9, 10 and let them do their thing, right? So for me, the companies that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, the ones who are performing the best are the ones who have identified, I know I suck in this area, so I want you to help me in that area, right? So that is the number one. That without a doubt, the number one thing is I know I suck, so you go do that for me, right? So you got to be self-aware, to know where your weaknesses are. And then you got to be humble enough to recognize, I want this thing to work and I'm not the guy. So this is the guy I'm going to bring in with me. So that's really the key. That's the number one area that I see separates a good small business owner or leader from the other.
And you know what? I'll add to that if I can.
Absolutely.
Because I've went through it. Just because you used to be good at leading a team in a certain area doesn't mean today you're the same type of leader, or you have the same passion, or you have the same knowledge about what you're doing that you did when you were starting and you were doing the grind and you were building it. I can speak from experience. Obviously the first 15, 20 years of my first business, I'm all in. I'm driving it. But then as you expand and you start diversifying your interest, and you have other businesses, and you start getting pulled in all these different directions, and you're less involved, you're not the same leader that company needs. It took me too long to figure that out. And so I went through my pivot to do exactly what you just advised, bringing in the right people around me. I probably wasted 3 years on that, thinking I could still do it, or I was still the one.
Right. Yeah, but you were self-aware enough to recognize it. That's the kicker.
Well, eventually I was like, what the hell? I'm the one that's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's critical. I mean, that's really where it's at. The rubber meets the road is, I always say, if the business is struggling, you got to look in the mirror. You're the problem. You're the problem.
Yeah. That's right. It starts at the top. Strategic alignment. And you talk about that with key stakeholders as being critical. Share some insights with us on how you work with companies to basically ensure, everyone's rowing in the same direction.
Yeah. So it goes back to that's I think the biggest part about play number one is identifying your why.
Communication.
And so that really breaks down into, we're going to look at a 1, 3, 5 year plan, and we're going to back into it. So there's a book I read at one time that says, that a CEO should be focusing on 1, 3, 5 years out, but your frontline worker really only looks about an hour out. They worry about, hey, I got to get to lunch. I got to get home. I got to get back to work tomorrow. So our goal is to structure the communication plan around that mindset. And so as you work your way down the value stream, you're going to tailor your communication differently, but you got to better communicate in a way that where the frontline worker knows how they impact the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan. And so that sometimes can be quick. A lot of times it centers around education, but that's why we focus on, you got to win the day, because that's what that frontline guy recognizes. And we tell them, if you win the day, this is how it impacts this. So one of the bigger turnarounds I did was a publicly traded company. When I started, it was a mess. On-time delivery was rough, major past dues. We actually sat with the frontline workers and explained to them what their hourly output and how it impacted the stock price. Obviously at a very high level, but they started to understand, okay, now I get it. Now I know why he's doing this, doing that. They're a stakeholder because they impact the bottom line. Again, so it just goes back to communication, win the day, the week, the month, the quarter, the year.
We didn't touch on this, but we kind of just grazed it a little bit on that last question in terms of like a business leader letting go a little bit to bring in somebody else. But let's get a little bit more specific on that, right? How many business owners struggle, I guess, with the idea of letting go and delegating even tasks? Like I'll tell you, we do. So Me Plus Ultra, our main sponsor, right, and a mastermind group that I have, we meet virtually. That's easy, right? But twice a year, we've got a business bourbon cigars leadership retreat. So I've got business owners, business leaders, and we're getting them to attend and this and that. And so I see them. I can always tell the ones that, man, I can't get away for 2.5 days. I can't get, and you've talked about this, they get so into the weeds. The big money is in working on it, not in it. And so And my first thought is every time I hear that is like, that's exactly why you need to be there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So talk to us about the struggle of letting go and delegating these tasks to steal, from traction or EOS, right? Elevate and delegate, or delegate and elevate, or however it goes. How do you address this when you're working with business owners?
Very delicately, because it is their baby, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously, if they're calling me, there's a certain they're already, I guess the shell is cracked to some extent, right? They're somewhat opening the opportunity to go down the delegation route. Traditionally, what I try to do is at a very high level say, let's talk about what you want next year to look like. What do you want to be? I want to be a $2 million a year company. Why are you not a $2 million a year company? Well, and they'll start talking, and I just start writing it down, write it down. So then I'll go, okay, so you can't do this. Well, you can't do this because of that. You can't do this because of this. And I said, do you see a common thread here? It could be Stewart. So how do we get Stewart out of this and have Stewart go sell? Oh, yeah, that's true. And that's traditionally how I break into it, right? I identify that the reason why X, Y, and Z isn't happening because of Stewart. And when you get it broken down into that level, now they're really like, okay, now I see it. So I strike while the iron's hot, and I say, let's put a plan in place now to try to make this thing happen. And I don't let off of it. Obviously, it's very gentle, but I do not let off of it, because once their eyes are open to let's make this thing happen, I drive it. So again, I've tried to pinpoint a lot of it's kind of, you're familiar with Lean Six Sigma, but the stuff is the 5 whys. Why? And you just ask why 5 times, you'll basically get them and realize, holy crap, I'm the problem. And then you can say, okay, let's work in a way that you feel comfortable letting that go, letting this individual learn from that. Now you can go do what you're best at doing.
Do me a favor.
Yeah.
So obviously you go in, you turn around, in terms of increasing revenue, increasing profit. Share 1 or 2 success stories where you've went in with your business playbook, right? Those 6 steps, and really advised people where your methods really turned something around for somebody. Let's do 2 different examples.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
One's a turnaround, and the other example is I need to optimize this thing because I'm getting ready to exit.
Yeah. Okay, so we go to the turnaround first, because this also happens to be the largest turnaround. So this was a company that was at one time was 80 million. Yeah. They called me because they were going backwards quickly, and they were, when I walked in the door, they were at 60 million. Their on-time delivery was like 52%. Their past dues were about 10 or 15% of their total backlog, and they could not figure out what was going on, but they were going backwards. This is a large company, so if they didn't get a handle on it quickly, they were going to be in trouble. Yeah. And so I go in, and again, for me,
kudos to them.
Yeah. Well, they were in trouble
for not just trying to solve, you know what I'm saying? I'm sure they went through that process, but kudos to them for reaching out.
Yeah, absolutely. It made an impact on me too. So it was a win-win for sure. But for me, business is really a set of inputs and outputs. So you have the front end demand, which is traditionally sales. You have the supply, which is traditionally purchasing. You have execution, and then you kind of have the back end stuff. So I go into a facility and I always try to identify, okay, at what point in the process is it broken? A lot of times the ops guys get a bad name because, man, they just can't get anything out the door. People very rarely look upstream and go, what really is causing the chaos downstream? So in this particular case, I go there and I say, okay, walk me through your process. And they're kind of walking me through stuff. And I recognize that since they're a publicly traded company, they're heavily focused on forecasting because they've got to be able to predict their future to some extent. And so what they were doing was they continued to change their dates in their system to make their forecast work. But what they failed to realize is when they changed the dates on the front end, it was creating havoc on the purchasing side because they couldn't tell who, what, when, or where I needed product. And so they get all these date changes, then they take all those date changes and push it to the supply base. The supply base had no clue what to make. And so they were always late. And then, so if you didn't have your material on time or you didn't have your material at all, the ops team didn't stand a chance. So the very first thing I try to tell them is, sales team, you're communicating your need to your purchasing and operations group based off of the dates in the system. If you constantly change, you're constantly creating confusion. So let's figure out a different way to communicate the forecast while keeping our demand constant. So we stopped changing the dates in the system. We developed a method to manage our forecast, albeit in Excel outside of the system, but we stabilized the demand, which allowed us to stabilize the supply, which allowed the operations team to execute. And within 3 months, on-time delivery hit 99%. Our past dues went to zero. And then we were able to implement the 3 value drivers and grow the business. And when I left 4 years later, we were back to $72 million in revenue and pushing good profits to the bottom line. All because one issue, which was the sales team was driving chaos throughout the entire system. So that was huge, right? So the exit goes to the very first company I ever turned around. So he calls me and says, I like the way you do business. I want to sell my business. Actually, the company I worked for at the time was their largest customer. And he says, our largest customer is like about 70% of our business, and they're starting to pull work out. And we need to change. And obviously, I want to diversify to sell. So I go in, and he says, no one outside of myself has ever looked at the books. And I'm like, that's gonna be a problem. So I get in there, and within 1 week, I pull all the stuff together, and I was like, hey, buddy, this customer is 98% of your work. Like, they're your entire business, and they're starting to pull out. And so we put together that sales funnel of, we got to identify a ton of opportunity here, because we're not only are we going to try to diversify to sell your company, we've got to diversify to save your company, because you're headed in a downward path really quickly. So we put we put a plan in place from a sales target and a sales funnel. We did things a little different because they're an aerospace business. We really started looking at margin. And so they were looking for bigger programs. I focused them on what is the things that you can put the most profit to the bottom line. And it happened to be small runs that nobody else wanted to do. So we found a need that really was in the manufacturing world, where they want to set machines up and run forever. We said, let's maximize your price. This is new business because we're going to tap into a customer base that we haven't ever dealt with before, and let's see what we can do. And we were able to get that business properly diversified and grew the top line by 10% by focusing on the small stuff, which allowed us to put the most pricing to the bottom line and grow the business outside of the one customer they had at the time. So that was the 1 in 3 value driving in regards to pricing and new business.
All right. So for the business leaders out there who might be struggling, outstanding examples, by the way.
Thank you.
I love when we have guests on the show that articulate so clearly exactly the steps that it takes or that they did. So I appreciate it, because it really helps, I think, our audience. But for the business or the business owners or leaders out there who are listening or watching today and they're struggling or they're feeling stagnant, what's the one actionable piece of advice they can implement to start moving toward, taking their business to the next level, getting it healthier?
Yeah. So the one thing that we try to do is, again, I try to have all the business owners drive their business versus being a victim of the result, right? So for that is, the very first thing you can do is start forecasting. And it don't have to be something elaborate. And so what I normally try to do is I say, all right, Mr. Business Owner, let's create a forecast that is 90% certain only for the next 30 days. We can look into month 2 and have, let's call it a 70 to 75% certainty. And then we look beyond that, you're going to be a 30 to 50% certainty. But let's really focus on the next 30 days. What that does is now it gives them something they can work towards. So it has the owner stop looking backwards and start looking forward. And then they get into I tell everyone, forecasting is a muscle. You don't come right out of the box and just say, hey, I'm a great forecaster. But you've got a guide. Then you can go into month 2 and you can look back and say, okay, this is what I assumed was going to happen. This is what actually happens. I need to do a better job of understanding what I can get out the door, or what's going to come in the door, or wait a minute, I can't control my expenses. And now you're starting to understand, okay, this is what it's like to drive my business? And every month, just get a little bit better and start forecasting a little further out. And then you all of a sudden look up and go, I'm driving my business now. So the one item that you can do that's fairly easy, forecast. Because it ain't going to kill your business. It's just going to make you better, right? So it isn't like it's an item that's going to be like, man, if I get this wrong, I'm shutting the doors. No, you're just kind of taking it from doing the review to driving the company forward.
Well, Stewart, I want to thank you today, man. Shared a ton of knowledge, your experiences, your expertise. Really appreciate it. Man, from understanding the power of fractional CFO to leveraging key plays for business health and growth. And you really laid out, I guess, a roadmap to take our businesses to the next level. So for those of you listening out there or watching, if you're ready to assess the current state of your business and gain insights into the potential areas of improvement, first off, there's no way you either watched or listened to this episode with Stewart and thought, yeah, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He couldn't come in and help me. It's impossible. I would imagine when you do these podcasts, how often, because there's a lot of big companies out there, how often when you do these shows, do you get calls, not just to hire your company, but try to bring you in and hire you in full time? That has to happen.
Yeah. So when I decided to go out and do my own thing, I was talking to another consultant, and he said the hardest thing you're going to fight is telling these big guys no. Sticking to your guns and saying, I'm going to continue down this path, no matter how nice the offer they're trying to give you, stick to the path. And so, yes, I told my wife, I think about 5 months ago, I said, we're at a point now where we have to make a call if we're going to do this forever or not. And we made that call to stick with it. So
I love it. Well, for anybody, I encourage you to visit Bracket Management's website. And I want to make sure, now we will have this link in the show notes. So if you go to meplusultra.com, we'll have the link in there as well to make it easy for everybody if you're driving or something and you can't write it down. But the website, I want to make sure I get the link right here. So it's Bracket Management, but you're abbreviating management. So it's bracketmgmt.com/assessment, right? And then the assessment's going to help people identify where their business stands in terms of strategy, finance, and operations, right?
That's correct. Yep.
And that's free to them. Free.
Yep. So it's roughly 30, 35 questions in each area. Once you take the assessment, you'll get a personalized results back, and it's not my opinion. So it's all objective based, data that allows us to say, okay, this is your grade. This is where you score. So you get a score in all three areas, and then you get an overall company score. And we pinpoint what you're doing good, and then what could obviously have some help.
I love it. All right. So make sure you do that. Once again, that's bracketmanagement.com/assessment, but you're abbreviating management. So it's bracketmgmt.com/assessment. Go do that. And don't forget, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already to Me Plus Ultra at meplusultra.com. You'll be able to access this show there, and that link will be in the show notes there. So make it easy. All you got to do is click. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube, which is Me Plus Ultra Network. That way you get all more episodes packed with actionable insights just like this one. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to Business, Bourbon, and Cigars. We'll catch you next time. Cheers, everyone.